I woke up in the Vampire King's bed, then he asked, "Did I meet your expectations?" The silk sheets were my first clue that something had gone terribly wrong. I didn't own silk sheets. I owned scratchy clearance cotton from Target and a comforter with a coffee stain I'd long since stopped trying to remove. But these sheets, God, these sheets felt like water against my skin, cool and impossibly smooth. My eyes snapped open. The ceiling above me was vaulted, disappearing into shadows despite the pale light filtering through enormous windows. Dark wooden beams crossed overhead like the ribs of some great beast. The bed beneath me was massive, easily king-sized, maybe California king, with posts at each corner carved into intricate designs I couldn't quite make out in my disoriented state. This was not my apartment. I shot upright and immediately regretted it as my head spun. My hand flew to my temple, and that's when I noticed what I was wearing, or rather, what I wasn't wearing. My jeans and sweater from last night were gone, replaced by a nightgown of deep burgundy silk that definitely wasn't mine. "Good evening." The voice came from the shadows near the window, smooth as aged whiskey and twice as dangerous. I yanked the sheets up to my chin despite the nightgown, my heart hammering against my ribs. A figure detached itself from the darkness, stepping into the dim light. He was tall, impossibly tall, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes that seemed to catch and hold the light like a cat's. His face was all sharp angles, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and lips that quirked into something that wasn't quite a smile. He wore all black, fitted trousers, a shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms, revealing pale skin marked with what looked like ancient scars. "Who the hell are you?" My voice came out steadier than I felt. "Where am I? What?" So many questions. He moved closer to the bed with a grace that seemed almost inhuman, fluid and predatory. "Though I suppose that's to be expected. You did have quite the evening." "I don't." I pressed my fingers to my forehead, trying to remember. There had been the gallery opening. My best friend Sienna had dragged me to some pretentious art show in the warehouse district. Champagne that tasted too expensive for a starving artist's budget. A strange man in the corner who'd watch me all night. And then... Nothing. "What did you do to me?" The fear was sharp now, cutting through my confusion. He raised one dark eyebrow. "I saved your life, Miss Bennett." The use of my name sent ice down my spine. "How do you know my name?" "I know many things." He settled into a chair near the bed, a massive wingback upholstered in deep green velvet, and crossed one leg over the other with aristocratic ease. "I know that you're 26 years old, you work at the Riverside Library, you prefer tea to coffee despite living in Seattle, and last night you were approximately 15 minutes away from having your throat torn out by a rogue vampire in an alley behind the Westbrook Gallery." The words hung in the air like smoke. I should have laughed. I should have told him he was insane, should have looked for my phone, my clothes, and exit. But something in his eyes, those strange, too bright eyes, made the denial stick in my throat. "Vampires aren't real," I whispered, but even to my own ears it sounded like a question. "No." In a movement too fast to follow, he was beside the bed, holding up my left hand. There on my wrist were 2 puncture marks, scabbed over but unmistakable. "Then how do you explain these?" I stared at the marks, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. "That's not, there has to be a rational explanation." He released my hand gently and moved back to his chair, giving me space. "I'm afraid the rational explanation is the one you're trying very hard not to believe. Vampires are real, Miss Bennett. They have been for millennia. And last night one of them decided you looked like dinner." The room tilted. I gripped the sheets harder, anchoring myself. "But you stopped it." "Him, and yes, I did." His expression darkened. "Victor was always a fool, breaking the covenant, hunting in broad awareness of human witnesses, leaving a mess. He gave me very little choice." "Covenant." "Rules, Miss Bennett, we have rules. Victor broke them, repeatedly." He studied me with an intensity that made me want to squirm. "Though I must admit, when I arrived to deal with him, I didn't expect to find you." "What's that supposed to mean?" He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time something like genuine curiosity flickered across his face. "Tell me, and please be honest, have you been dreaming lately? dreams of darkness, of blood, of a voice calling your name. My breath caught. He saw it, the recognition in my eyes, and nodded slowly. I thought so. For 3 months I'd been having the same nightmare. A castle wreathed in mist, halls lined with portraits whose eyes followed my movement, and a voice, deep and commanding, speaking words I could never quite remember when I woke. I'd chalked it up to stress, to too many late nights reading Gothic novels at the library's reference desk. How did you? I couldn't finish the question. Because, Miss Bennet, or may I call you Nora? He didn't wait for permission. Nora, those weren't ordinary dreams, they were summons, old magic, blood magic, the kind that hasn't been used in centuries. He paused, his gaze never leaving mine. Someone has been calling you, and last night you finally answered. That's insane. Yes, he agreed calmly. It is, it's also true. I shook my head, adrenaline and disbelief warring in my chest. Okay, let's say, just hypothetically, that I believe any of this. Vampires, magic, whatever, why me? I'm nobody. I'm a library assistant who eats cereal for dinner and hasn't had a date in 8 months. Why would anyone summon me? Something flickered in his expression, sympathy, maybe, or recognition. That, I'm afraid, is the question we need to answer. But first, perhaps we should address the more immediate concern. Which is... He stood, moving to a side table where a crystal decanter caught the light. He poured something dark red into a glass, please let it be wine, and took a measured sip before turning back to me. When Victor bit you, he didn't just feed. He initiated a bond, incomplete but present nonetheless. That bond needs to be either completed or severed, and it needs to happen soon, preferably before sunset tomorrow. Or what? Or you'll begin the transformation into one of his bloodline, which, given that I killed him approximately 3 hours ago, will result in a rather unpleasant death for you as well. The casual way he said it, like he was discussing the weather, made my stomach drop. You killed him. I am the Vampire King, Nora. It's literally my job to kill those who break our laws. He set down his glass. My name is Theron Ashford. I'm approximately 843 years old, give or take a decade, and for the last 4 centuries I've maintained the peace between the vampire courts and the human world. Victor's actions threatened that peace, so yes, I killed him, and I'd do it again. Theron Ashford. The name rolled through my mind, and with it came a flash of memory, the dreams, the voice. It had been his voice calling me. Did I meet your expectations? The question caught me so off guard that I blinked. What? He gestured vaguely at himself at the room. In your dreams you've been seeing me, or a version of me, for months. Now you're awake in my home, in my bed technically, and I'm standing here telling you that everything you thought you knew about the world is wrong. So I'm curious. He tilted his head, something almost vulnerable crossing his features before vanishing. Did I meet your expectations? Am I the monster you imagined? The question was absurd. Everything about this situation was absurd, and yet... I looked at him, really looked, at the way he'd given me space when I was afraid, at the careful distance he maintained, at the glass of what I now realized actually was wine, not blood, at the fact that I was dressed in a nightgown instead of my own clothes because he'd apparently tried to give me some dignity. I don't know what you are, I said finally, but I don't think you're a monster. Something in his expression softened. Then you're either very wise or very foolish, Nora Bennet. We'll find out which. He moved toward the door, then paused. There are clothes in the wardrobe that should fit. Bathroom is through there. He nodded toward a door I hadn't noticed. When you're ready, come downstairs. We have much to discuss and time is not on our side. Wait, I called out as he reached the door. The bond thing, you said it needs to be completed or severed. How do we sever it? Theron's hand rested on the doorframe and he didn't turn around. That's one of those things we'll discuss downstairs, but Nora, there's something you should know. What? Severing a blood bond requires replacing it with a stronger one, which means to save your life. Now he did look back, his eyes catching the light in that unsettling way. You'll have to bond with me instead. He left before I could respond, the door clicking shut with a finality that echoed through the enormous room. I sat there in his bed in his nightgown, with puncture marks on my wrist and a Vampire King's confession hanging in the air. This couldn't be real. But the marks on my wrist were real. The silk sheets were real. And somewhere deep inside me, in a place I'd been trying to ignore for 3 months of strange dreams, I knew I'd been heading toward this moment all along. The only question was whether I was brave enough to see where it led. The clothes in the wardrobe fit suspiciously well. I ran my hands over the black jeans and deep green sweater, both exactly my size, and tried not to think too hard about the implications. Either Theron Ashford was very good at guessing measurements, or he'd known I'd end up here. Neither option was particularly comforting. The bathroom, because of course a vampire king would have a bathroom attached to his bedroom, was all dark marble and gold fixtures. I caught my reflection in the mirror and barely recognized myself. My auburn hair was tangled, my brown eyes too wide, and those marks on my wrist stood out like an accusation. I splashed water on my face and tried to think. The logical part of my brain, the part that had gotten me through a master's degree and 2 years of dealing with the public at the library, insisted this was all some elaborate prank or psychotic break. The rest of me, the part that had always known the world was stranger than it seemed, whispered that logic had left the building the moment I'd woken up in silk sheets. I found Theron in what could only be described as a study, though calling it that felt like calling the Grand Canyon a ditch. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined 2 walls, packed with volumes that looked older than my great-grandmother. A fireplace large enough to stand in dominated another wall, flames crackling despite it being May. Leather furniture was arranged in conversational clusters, and windows overlooked what appeared to be extensive grounds shrouded in twilight. Theron stood at one of those windows, backlit by the dying light, and I realized with a start that he cast a reflection in the glass. Another myth debunked. "Mirrors work fine," he said without turning around. "That one always amused me. Also, garlic is just unpleasant, not lethal, and crosses only work if the wielder has genuine faith, which is rarer than you'd think." "Can you read my mind?" "No, but you're refreshingly easy to read." He finally turned, and I noticed he'd changed into a different shirt, this one charcoal grey. It shouldn't have mattered, but somehow it made him seem more real, less like a figure from my dreams. "You're wondering what's true and what's fiction. A reasonable question." "And the sunlight thing?" "Uncomfortable but not fatal. We're stronger at night, weaker during the day, but we won't burst into flames." He gestured to a chair. "Sit, please. We need to talk and you look ready to bolt." I wasn't sure if sitting made it better or worse, but my legs were shaky enough that I took the offer. The leather chair was butter soft and probably cost more than my car. Theron settled across from me, separated by a low table that held a tea service that definitely hadn't been there a moment ago. "I took the liberty," he said, pouring amber liquid into a delicate cup. "You prefer Earl Grey with honey if I remember correctly." "How do you?" I trailed off. "Right, you know things." "I've been watching you for 3 weeks, Nora, ever since the summons dreams became strong enough for me to trace." He offered me the cup, and I took it on autopilot. I needed to understand why someone would use blood magic to call a random human woman. I needed to know if you were bait, a trap, or something else entirely. "And what did you decide?" "That you're genuinely oblivious, which either makes you innocent or an exceptional actress." He poured his own cup, tea, not blood, I noted, and sat back. "Tell me about your family, your parents." The question was so unexpected that I answered before thinking. "Dead. Car accident when I was 19. I was an only child, so it's just me now." "Grandparents?" "Never knew them. Mom's parents died before I was born, and Dad's family." I frowned, trying to remember. Dad never talked about them. I got the impression there was some kind of falling out. Theron's eyes sharpened. "Your father's name?" "David Bennett. Why?" He set down his cup with careful precision. "And you never wondered why you have no extended family? No cousins, no great aunts, no genealogy?" "I mean, some families are just small." "Not like this." He stood, moving to one of the bookshelves and pulling down a volume bound in cracked leather. "Nora, I need you to consider a possibility. What if your isolation isn't coincidence? What if your family was deliberately cut off, hidden?" "Hidden from what?" He opened the book, flipping through pages covered in handwritten script and detailed drawings. When he found what he wanted, he turned it toward me. The drawing showed a woman in medieval dress, her face proud and beautiful. Beneath it, a name in elaborate script, Catherine Bennett, blood scribe of the third house. My blood went cold. Bennett's a common name, that doesn't. Look at her, Nora, really look. I didn't want to, but I forced myself to study the drawing and my breath caught. The shape of her face, the set of her eyes, the curve of her mouth. It was like looking at my own reflection, aged by centuries and rendered in ink. Blood scribes were rare, Theron said quietly. Humans born with the ability to work vampire magic, to bind and break blood bonds. They were valued, protected, and occasionally, when politics got messy, hunted. The last known blood scribe died in 1847, or so we thought. I couldn't stop staring at the drawing. You think I'm, what, some kind of magical human? I think someone in your bloodline was, and I think that's why you were called. Blood scribe abilities pass through families, dormant sometimes for generations, but never truly gone. He closed the book. If you carry even a fraction of that power, there are vampires who would kill to possess you, and others who would kill to prevent that from happening. The teacup rattled in my hands. I set it down before I dropped it. This is insane. Yes, you're telling me I'm some kind of magical battery for vampire spells? Essentially. And there are people, vampires, who want to use me. Or eliminate the threat you represent. Yes. He knelt in front of my chair, bringing himself to eye level. This close, I could see flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I know this is overwhelming. I know you want to run, to pretend this is all a nightmare. But Nora, you have perhaps 24 hours before Victor's bond begins to turn you. We need to break it. And to do that, I need to know if you have blood scribe abilities. How do we find out? You try to break a bond. He held out his wrist. Mine specifically. If you can feel it, manipulate it, you have the gift. I stared at his outstretched arm. And if I do, if I can break it, then you're possibly the most valuable person in the vampire world, and we have much bigger problems than Victor's incomplete bond. And if I can't? Something flickered in his expression. Then we proceed with the alternative. I replace Victor's bond with my own, making you part of my bloodline. You won't become a vampire, the bond wasn't complete enough, but you'll be connected to me. What does that mean, connected? It means I'll be able to sense you, your location, your emotions, and you'll sense me in return. It means my blood will run in your veins, giving you extended life, enhanced healing, and a permanent link to my power. He paused. It also means you'll be marked as mine, under my protection, but also my responsibility. Other vampires won't be able to touch you without declaring war on my house. The weight of it settled over me like a physical thing. That's a pretty big commitment for someone you just met. I've been alive for 8 centuries, Nora. I've learned to make quick decisions. His eyes searched mine. And despite the circumstances, I don't think saving you is a decision I'll regret. There was something in the way he said it, something that made my heart do a strange flutter. This was ridiculous. He was a vampire, I was apparently magical human bait, and we'd known each other for all of 2 hours. This was not the time for whatever this feeling was. But when I looked at him, kneeling there with his wrist still offered, I didn't see a monster. I saw someone who'd saved my life, who'd dressed me with care, who'd made me tea and was trying very hard to give me choices in a situation with very few of them. Okay, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Let's try, tell me what to do. Approval flashed in his eyes. He took my hand, guiding it to his wrist. Close your eyes, focus on the point of contact. If you have the gift, you should feel something, threads, connections, the ties that bind me to my bloodline. I did as he instructed, pressing my fingers to his wrist. His skin was cool, his pulse slow but steady. Another myth debunked, vampires had heartbeats. At first I felt nothing but skin and bone. Then, gradually, something else. It started as a whisper at the edge of my consciousness, like hearing a conversation in another room. I focused harder, and suddenly it was there, a vast web of connections spreading out from Theron like roots from a tree. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one a glowing thread of energy. Oh my God, I breathed. I can see them. Theron's voice was carefully controlled. Don't pull yet, just observe. Can you find individual threads? I concentrated, following the web. Some threads were bright and strong, others faint and frayed. And there, one that pulsed with a different rhythm, newer than the others but already integrating into the pattern. There's one that's different, recent. That's the bond to you. Victor's bond transferred to me when I killed him. It's temporary, unstable. Can you touch it? I reached for it mentally, and the thread responded, warming under my attention. It was strange and intimate, feeling this connection between us. I could sense Theron through it, his wariness, his curiosity, and underneath it all, a bone-deep loneliness that made my chest ache. Nora, his voice was strained. You need to stop now. I opened my eyes and found him staring at me with something like awe. You're not just a blood scribe, you're a strong one. I could feel you in my head, touching bonds that should be impossible for anyone but me to access. Is that bad? It's dangerous. He stood, running a hand through his dark hair. It's also extraordinary. Do you know what you could do with that kind of power? You could break bloodlines, dissolve houses, end bonds that have existed for centuries. You could. Sever Victor's bond without needing yours to replace it, I finished. He nodded slowly. Yes, but... But what? But attempting to sever a bond you're currently inside is incredibly dangerous. If you slip, if you break the wrong thread, you could kill yourself. Or worse, leave yourself vulnerable to any vampire who wants to claim you. He met my eyes. The safer option is still to let me complete the bond. It's not as permanent as you becoming a vampire, but it's stable, protected. The safer option for me, you mean? Yes. I stood, moving to the window. Outside, full night had fallen, and I could see lights from what looked like a small town in the distance. How far from Seattle was I? How far from my normal life? What if I said no to both? What if I just wanted to go home and pretend this never happened? Then you'd be dead by this time tomorrow, and I'd spend the next century wondering if I could have saved you. The honesty in his voice made me turn. He stood silhouetted by the firelight, this ancient being who'd somehow become responsible for my life, and I realized something. You would, wouldn't you, wonder, care even? Despite my better judgment, yes. He smiled, but it was sad. You remind me of someone who believed the world was better than it appeared, who saw light in the darkness. She'd have liked you, I think. What happened to her? She died a very long time ago. He shook off the melancholy like a coat. But that's not relevant. What's relevant is your decision, Nora. I can't make it for you. I looked at my wrist, at the marks there. I thought about my quiet life at the library, my small apartment, my careful routines. I thought about the dreams that had haunted me for months, the voice calling my name. I thought about the web of connections I'd seen, the loneliness buried beneath Theron's careful control. If I agree to the bond, I said slowly, does it have to be permanent? Is there a way to break it later once we're sure Victor's influence is gone? There is. If you develop your blood scribe abilities, you'd eventually be able to sever it yourself. And until then, I'm yours. Under my protection, he corrected. Not my possession. I'm not Victor, Nora. I'm not interested in owning you. Then what are you interested in? He crossed the room until he stood before me, close enough that I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. In keeping you alive, in understanding why someone called you, and perhaps, he lifted one hand, not quite touching my face, in getting to know the woman who looks at a vampire and doesn't see a monster. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was crazy, all of it was crazy. Okay, I whispered, do it, the bond, but Theron, you're right, I don't see a monster, but if you make me regret this, then you'll have the power to unmake me. He said it simply, like a promise. That's what blood scribes do after all, they humble kings. He was standing so close I could feel the cold radiating from him, could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. When he took my hand, his touch was gentle. This will hurt, he warned, but it will be quick. Wait, I grabbed his arm. Did I meet your expectations? You asked me before, but I should ask you too. I'm not some magical powerhouse, I'm just me. Is that going to be enough? Theron's smile was real this time, reaching his eyes. Nora Bennett, you woke up in a strange bed, discovered vampires are real, learned you're magical, and agreed to blood bond with a king you just met, all without fainting or running. You're more than enough. Before I could respond, he brought my wrist to his mouth. The pain was sharp and bright, but he was right, it was quick. And then there was something else, a warmth spreading from the bite, running up my arm and straight to my chest. I gasped, and suddenly I could feel him, not just physically but inside my head, a presence that was vast and ancient and surprisingly gentle. When he pulled back, his eyes had changed, darkened, pupils blown wide. My blood stained his lips. "It's done," he said roughly. "The bond is complete. You're mine now, Nora, and I'm yours." The connection between us hummed, alive and electric, and I knew with absolute certainty that my life would never be the same. The question was whether that was a promise or a threat. I woke to the smell of coffee and the certain knowledge that I wasn't alone. The bond, Theron's bond, hummed at the edge of my consciousness like a second heartbeat. I could feel him somewhere below me, calm but alert, his attention focused on something I couldn't quite sense. 2 days had passed since that night in his study. 2 days of learning to navigate the connection between us, of Theron teaching me to shield my thoughts, mostly, and of discovering that being bonded to a vampire king came with some unexpected perks. For one, I could see in the dark now, not perfectly, but enough that I didn't need to fumble for light switches. For another, the minor scrapes and bruises I'd accumulated over years of clumsy living had vanished overnight, my body healing with supernatural efficiency. And then there was the way I could feel Theron's emotions when he let his guard down, the loneliness I'd glimpsed before, yes, but also a fierce protectiveness and a curiosity that mirrored my own. It would have been terrifying if it wasn't also kind of wonderful. I found him in the kitchen, because of course he had a kitchen, even though he'd explained that while he could eat regular food, it did nothing for him. The coffee was for me, made exactly how I liked it without me having to ask. "Good morning," he looked up from the newspaper he'd been reading, an actual paper newspaper. "How did you sleep?" "Like the dead," I paused. "Sorry, is that offensive?" His mouth quirked. "I've heard worse. Sit, we need to talk about what happens next." The seriousness in his tone killed my attempt at morning humour. I took the coffee he'd poured and settled at the kitchen island. The room was all gleaming steel and dark wood, modern but warm. Like Theron himself, I was learning, ancient but adaptable. "What's wrong?" "Nothing yet, but I received word this morning from the other houses. They know about you." My stomach dropped. How? Victor had friends, or at least associates. When he died, they started asking questions, and when I invoked King's protection over a human, people noticed. He folded the newspaper with precise movements. "There's to be a gathering tomorrow night. The heads of the 7 houses, their lieutenants, various hangers-on. They want to meet you, to verify that you're under my protection and understand what that means." "Which is, that harming you means war with me." He said it calmly, but I felt the steel underneath through the bond. "Most of them won't be a problem. Most of them owe me favors or respect the old laws, but there are a few who might see you as a threat. Because of the blood scribe thing." "Yes, if word spreads about what you can do," he trailed off. "I become a target," I finished, "either someone to be used or eliminated. I won't let that happen." The conviction in his voice made something warm bloom in my chest. 2 days and already I was starting to trust this man, this vampire, with my life. Maybe I was crazy, or maybe the bond made it impossible not to trust someone you could literally feel. "So what do we do?" I asked. "We attend the gathering. We show them that you're protected, powerful in your own right and not to be trifled with." He studied me over his own cup. "And you continue learning to use your abilities. If you can demonstrate control competence, they'll be less likely to view you as a threat. No pressure or anything. You've learned more in 2 days than most blood scribes managed in months. You're a natural, Nora." The praise shouldn't have warmed me as much as it did. I had a good teacher. Something flickered in his eyes, there and gone too fast to name. "Come, if we're to convince the houses that you're formidable, we should practice." The practice room turned out to be a library even more impressive than the study, this one with tables covered in old texts and strange instruments. Thuron had been teaching me to sense and manipulate blood bonds, starting with small ones, the ties between him and various members of his house. Today, though, he had something different planned. "I want you to try breaking a bond," he said, gesturing to a chair where a man I'd met yesterday, Marcus, one of Thuron's lieutenants, sat waiting. "Break it," I looked between them, "but you said that was dangerous." "It can be, but Marcus has volunteered, and the bond between us is old and stable. If you can learn to sever cleanly without damage, you'll have a skill that very few possess." Thuron moved to stand beside me. "More importantly, you'll be able to free yourself from our bond when you're ready." That stopped me. "You want me to practice so I can leave?" "I want you to have the choice." His voice was quiet. "I forced this on you, Nora. The circumstances required it, but it was still your autonomy I took. The least I can do is give you the tools to reclaim it." I stared at him, this ancient king who'd saved my life and bound me to him, and who was now teaching me how to break free. The bond between us thrummed with his sincerity, his guilt, and underneath it, something he was trying very hard to hide. The thought that he might not want me to leave. "What if I don't want to break it?" The words were out before I could stop them. Thuron went very still. "Nora, I'm not saying I want it forever," I continued quickly. "But right now it doesn't feel like a prison, it feels like—" I struggled for words. "Like I'm not alone. I've been alone since my parents died, Thuron. And now there's this connection, this certainty that someone would know if something happened to me, would care. That's not nothing." "It's also not real," he said, but his voice was rough. "The bond creates artificial intimacy. What you feel is mine." I cut him off. "Maybe the bond makes it easier, but don't tell me what I feel isn't real. I've spent 2 days in your head, remember? I know you feel it too." The silence stretched between us, heavy with things neither of us was quite ready to say. Finally, Thuron turned away, his shoulders tight. "We should focus on the lesson." It was a deflection, but I let it go, for now. Marcus proved to be a patient subject, walking me through what it would feel like when I found his bond with Thuron. It took me 20 minutes and 3 false starts, but finally I felt it. A thick, complex thread that pulsed with decades of loyalty and trust. "Don't pull yet," Thuron instructed, standing close enough that I could feel his cold presence at my back. "Find the point where it connects to Marcus, the anchor. That's what you need to release." I followed the thread, tracing it back to where it rooted in Marcus's chest, or his soul, or whatever vampires had. The anchor was intricate, woven through with smaller threads. "It's complicated," I murmured. "Blood bonds are living things. They grow, adapt. To break one cleanly, you have to convince it to release, not tear it away." "How do I convince an energy thread to let go?" "You ask." His voice was soft, meant only for me. "Blood magic responds to will and intent. If you want it to release, if Marcus wants to be released, the bond will listen." I took a breath and focused on the anchor, projecting a simple thought: let go. Nothing happened. I tried again, harder this time, but the bond resisted. Frustrated, I opened my eyes. "It's not working." "Because you're demanding, not asking." Thuron's hand settled on my shoulder, and immediately the bond between us flared to life, showing me what he meant. "Feel this. Feel how our connection works. It's not force, it's agreement, mutual recognition." I closed my eyes again, but this time I stayed aware of Thuron's presence, of the way our bond hummed with synchronicity. When I reached for Marcus's anchor again, I didn't demand. I requested. I offered freedom as a gift, not a command. The bond sighed, I swear it sighed, and began to unravel. "That's it," Thuron encouraged. "Gentle now, let it go at its own pace." I did, watching in my mind's eye as the threads loosened and released, until finally the anchor disappeared entirely. I opened my eyes to find Marcus grinning. "Clean break, my lord," he said to Thuron. "Didn't feel a thing except relief. She's good." "She is." Thuron's hand was still on my shoulder, and through the bond I felt his pride in something else, something warmer. "Well done, Nora." The gathering the next night was held in a mansion that made Thuron's home look modest. I'd been dressed by someone named Isabel, a vampire who apparently served as Theron's household manager and had opinions about fashion that brooked no argument. The result was a dress of midnight blue that hugged my curves and made me feel like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Theron had assured me I looked perfect. The Bond had told me he was lying through his teeth. I didn't look perfect. I looked devastating. I'd felt his reaction when I'd descended the stairs, the sharp spike of desire he'd quickly suppressed. It had been gratifying and terrifying in equal measure. Now we stood in a ballroom full of vampires, and I tried very hard not to think about the fact that any one of them could kill me before I could blink. "Stay close," Theron murmured, his hand resting at the small of my back. "And remember, you're not prey here. You're under my protection, which makes you untouchable. Unless someone wants to start a war. Unless that, yes." The heads of the 7 houses were exactly what I'd expected, ancient, powerful, and looking at me like I was either a curious novelty or a potential threat. Theron introduced me to each one, a careful dance of politics and veiled threats. It was all going fine until we reached the last house. Lady Morgana was beautiful in the way a knife is beautiful, all sharp edges and cold elegance. Her dark eyes assessed me with open disdain. "So this is the human who's caused such upheaval," she said, not bothering with pleasantries. "I must say, Theron, I expected more. She looks rather ordinary." Theron's hand tightened on my back, but I spoke before he could. "Looks can be deceiving, Lady Morgana. I find that the truly dangerous things rarely announce themselves." Her eyebrow arched. "Are you calling yourself dangerous, child?" "I'm saying you'd be foolish to underestimate me. But then, wisdom and immortality don't always go hand in hand." The room went silent. I felt Theron's amusement through the Bond, even as his face remained carefully neutral. Morgana's smile was all teeth. "Perhaps she has some spirit after all. Very well, let's test it. I challenge your protection, Theron. Let's see if the blood scribe can defend herself." "Morgana," Theron's voice held warning. "The old laws allow for challenges," she cut him off. "Or have you forgotten? I'm not proposing combat, merely a demonstration. Let her prove she's worth the protection of a king." I could feel Theron's anger, his desire to refuse. But I could also feel his hesitation. Refusing would make me look weak, would suggest I needed him to fight my battles. "It's okay," I said quietly just for him. "Let me do this." "Nora, trust me." Through the Bond, I felt his war with himself. Then, reluctantly, he stepped back. "What did you have in mind, Morgana?" "Something simple, a test of her blood scribe abilities." Morgana gestured, and a young vampire stepped forward, looking nervous. "This is Christian, newly turned, barely a year in my house. Let your pet break his bond to me. If she can do it without harming him or me, I'll acknowledge her abilities. If she fails," her smile sharpened, "well, then we'll know she's merely a human playing at power." I looked at Christian, at the fear in his eyes, and made my decision. "All right, but when I succeed, you don't just acknowledge my abilities. You swear not to move against Theron or me, ever." Morgana's eyes glittered, confident. "Very well, I agree." Theron's presence in my mind was a steady anchor as I approached Christian. The young vampire looked terrified, and I didn't blame him. I was asking him to let me sever his connection to his maker, which went against every instinct he had. "I won't hurt you," I promised quietly. "Do you trust me?" "I don't know you," he whispered back. "Then trust Theron. He wouldn't let me do this if he thought I'd fail." I wasn't sure if that was true, but it seemed to help. Christian nodded jerkily. I closed my eyes and reached for his bond. It was there, bright and new, connecting him to Morgana with threads of loyalty and maker's blood. This was more complex than Marcus's bond, more intimate. Breaking it would leave Christian vulnerable, at least for a while. But Morgana had made this a test, and I'd be damned if I failed. I found the anchor point and did what Theron had taught me. I asked. I offered Christian freedom, showed him that he could exist without the bond, that breaking it wouldn't break him. The threads began to loosen, but slowly, resisting. Christian was afraid. The bond sensed it, tried to hold on. "It's all right to be scared," I murmured, not sure if I was talking to Christian or the bond itself. But you're stronger than you know, you don't need this to survive. I felt Theron then, his power flowing through our bond, supporting me, not doing the work for me but offering his strength, his certainty. I grabbed onto it like a lifeline and pulled. The bond released. Christian gasped, stumbling back, and for a moment I thought I'd hurt him, but then he straightened, wonder crossing his face. I can't feel her, he said. I can't, I'm free. Morgana's expression was unreadable. She looked at Christian, at me, and then at Theron. Impressive, and without harm to either of us. You've trained her well, Theron. She trained herself, Theron corrected, moving to my side. His pride in me was palpable through the bond. I merely pointed her in the right direction. Morgana studied me with new respect. Very well, I acknowledge the blood scribe's abilities, and I swear on my house and my name not to move against either of you. She tilted her head. Though I do wonder, Theron, if you've considered the implications. A blood scribe powerful enough to break bonds this easily. She could unmake you if she chose. Aren't you concerned? No, Theron's answer was immediate, absolute. Because unlike you, Morgana, I don't rule through fear. Nora is powerful, yes, but power without choice is just another form of slavery. I'd rather have a free ally than a chained servant. The way he said it, looking at me, made my heart do complicated things. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully worded conversations. By the time we returned to Theron's home, I was exhausted and running on adrenaline. You were magnificent tonight, Theron said as we entered his study. Our study, I'd started thinking of it. Morgana is notoriously difficult to impress. I was terrified the entire time. I know, I could feel it, but you didn't let it stop you. He poured 2 glasses of wine, offering me one. You're going to be fine, Nora. Better than fine, you're going to be extraordinary. I took the wine but didn't drink it. There was something I needed to say, something that had been building since the gathering. Theron, what Morgana said about me being able to unmake you. She's right, isn't she? I could break our bond now. I'm strong enough. Yes, he didn't hesitate. You are. And you're really not worried I will. He set down his glass and crossed to where I stood. This close, I could see the flecks of gold in his eyes, could feel the bond between us humming with unspoken things. I'm 800 years old, Nora. I've survived wars, plagues, betrayals, and the slow erosion of time. I've learned to read people to know when I'm being used or lied to. He lifted one hand, cupping my face with a gentleness that belied his strength. And when I look at you, I don't see someone who wants to unmake me. I see someone who's been alone for too long, who's found an unexpected connection, and who's brave enough to see where it leads. That's a lot to see in someone you've known for 4 days. 4 days and 3 months of dreams, he corrected. You've been in my head, Nora, just as I've been in yours. The bond doesn't lie, I know you. And I think perhaps you know me too. He was right. Through the bond, I knew his loneliness, his dedication to maintaining peace, his guilt over the lives he'd taken and the ones he'd failed to save. I knew his love of old books and terrible puns, his preference for tea over coffee despite his English roots, his secret fondness for terrible reality television. I knew him in ways that should have taken years, not days. What if the bond is wrong? I whispered. What if what we feel is just artificial proximity? Then we'll discover that when you break the bond. His thumb brushed my cheekbone. But Nora, I don't think it's wrong. I think the bond showed us what was already there, the potential for something real. You're talking about the dreams, the summons. Yes, someone called you to me months before Victor's attack. Someone knew we were meant to meet. His smile was soft. Call me a fool, but I don't think that was an accident. You're a fool, I said, but I was smiling too. An 800-year-old fool. Your fool, though, his eyes searched mine. If you'll have me. The bond between us flared bright and warm, and I realized something. I could break it now, sever the connection and walk away free. Theron would let me go, would even help me. But I didn't want to. Maybe in time, when I was stronger, more in control of my abilities, maybe then I'd release the bond and we'd discover if what we felt was real or magical. But for now, I wanted this. The connection, the certainty, the feeling of being known. I'll have you, I said, for now, and we'll see where this goes. For now is enough. He leaned down, slowly enough that I could pull away if I wanted. I didn't want to. His lips met mine, cool and gentle, and the bond between us sang. I could feel his relief, his joy, his desire tempered by infinite patience. I kissed him back, pouring everything I couldn't yet say into the contact, my gratitude, my trust, my tentative hope. When we pulled apart, I was breathless and he was smiling. "Did I mention," he said, "that blood scribes traditionally lived in the king's household, as advisors and protectors? Are you offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a home, for as long as you want it." His expression turned serious. "No obligations, no expectations beyond what you choose, just a place to belong." I thought of my tiny apartment, my quiet life, my careful routines. I thought of waking up in silk sheets and finding tea made exactly how I liked it. I thought of a bond that hummed with connection and a king who'd given me power instead of taking it away. "I'll need to give notice at the library," I said. Joy flashed across his face. "Does that mean?" "It means I'm saying yes, to the home, to the training, to seeing where this goes." I took his hand, twining our fingers together. "I woke up in your bed 4 days ago, Theron Ashford. I think it's time I stopped being surprised by where I end up." His laugh was warm and real. "Then welcome home, Nora Bennett. May it be everything you didn't know you needed." As he pulled me close, the bond settling into something warm and right, I thought that maybe it already was. 3 months later, I found Theron in the library, surrounded by old texts and looking frustrated. "Any luck?" I asked, settling into the chair beside him. "Nothing conclusive. Whoever summoned you covered their tracks well." He pushed a book away with a sigh. "We may never know who or why." "Does it matter?" I reached across, taking his hand. The bond hummed contentedly. "I'm here, I'm safe, we're whatever we are." "Happy," he suggested. "I believe the word is happy." I pretended to consider it. Revolutionary concept for an 800-year-old vampire. "You're a terrible influence." "You love it." He pulled me into his lap and I went willingly. We'd been taking things slow, well, slow by vampire standards. No bond breaking yet, though I practiced regularly. No promises beyond the day-to-day. Just this, morning tea, midnight conversations, and the slow building of something that felt remarkably like home. "I do," he admitted. "Love it, love." He paused, uncertain for the first time in weeks. "I know," I said, saving him from finishing. "I know, me too." The bond told him what I wasn't quite ready to say aloud. That was the thing about blood magic. It didn't let you hide, not really. And maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. After all, I'd woken up in the Vampire King's bed and found a life I never knew I wanted. Some mornings you just get lucky. Want more supernatural romance and unexpected destinies? Join my Patreon to watch the full extended stories. The link is in the description below. Exclusive and uncensored episodes are available only on Patreon. Check the link in the description.